Hi, everybody. Welcome to Christian Homestead. My name is Jared. If you didn't know, we have our new apostle. It's Elder Clark G. Gilbert. And yesterday I did a live stream as soon as I found out the news. And we were analyzing everything that we could about him. And at this part of the live stream, I got a comment from Primetime KCL in the chat. And they said, Jared, was the most recent Aurora Borealis equidistant between Elder Holland's death and the calling of Clark G. Gilbert? I'm thinking yes, 3 weeks between each. And so in the live stream, I tried to do the calculations and it seemed like that was the case. And I have some news for you. That's why I'm making this video. Now, let's go back a little bit before we talk about that. In case you're new to the channel, we noticed that between the death dates of President Nelson on September 27th of last year and President Holland on December 27th, which that's kind of what started this whole thing, is realizing that they both passed away on the 27th of the month. So exactly 3 months apart. And in between that time, there was, I don't know if there have been others that I've missed, but from my point of view, this is the third really large Aurora event where the entire United States could see the Aurora, all the way down to Arizona, to Texas, Florida, Mexico. And so I rushed up to the temple lot. I took these pictures. It was one of the most incredible experiences of my life. Thank goodness for Caitlin with Anticipating Christ's Return, because I was working in my office and she sent me a text and she's like, oh, my sister just took these pictures of the Aurora. And I was like, it's happening right now. I knew it was going to happen that night, but I ran outside of our house. This is from the house that we were renting. And this is what it actually looked like. This is not because I had long exposure on or night mode. This is what it actually looked like as I was stepping out of my house. So we went up there and got all these amazing pictures. I took video. I did a live stream. This was on the night of November 11th and into the morning of November 12th. And so I was talking to Mindy and we were talking about this and she was like, oh my gosh, I think that was exactly in the middle. And in my mind, I was like, no, it doesn't seem like that was in the middle. But she heard and did the calculation, and she was like, yep, it was right in the middle. Okay, so let's look really quick at some of the details of the passing of President Nelson and President Holland, and then we'll move on to Elder Clark G. Gilbert. We're looking at my spreadsheet called Timeline Second Coming. So President Nelson passes away the 27th of the month, like President Holland, at the age of 101. So he was our longest living prophet or apostle in this dispensation. And he passed away 7 days before General Conference. I took note of that because we saw a lot of sevens with President Nelson. A lot of times where he seemed to intentionally be using the number 7. There was a stretch of 7 months where he would do a social media post once a month, and he would repeat a word or a phrase or titles for women, for example, 7 times. And it went for 7 months, and then it stopped. And there's so many other 7s I can point to, but so he passed away 7 days before General Conference. When you do the calculations, which you can easily do on timeanddate.com or .org, I'm not sure if it's .com or .org, he served as president of the church for 7.7 years. And it actually boils down to 7 years, 7 months, 7 weeks, and 7 days. I have another spreadsheet that shows that. And then he also passed away the same month that he was born. He was born September 9th of 1924. Just like President Holland. President Holland was born in December. So let's scroll up. He passed away on the 27th of the month. It was the 7th of Tevet on the Jewish calendar, which was also a Jewish Sabbath. I take note of that because President Holland said that he was the church's point of contact, or the main bridge between Jews and the church. Okay, and then let's see, died the same month that he was born. Oh yeah. So he went into the hospital on Christmas Eve, and Christmas in Utah was the warmest Christmas on record. And then the day that he passed away, temperatures plummeted. Also, I don't have it here, but oh yeah, no, I do right here. The day of his funeral on New Year's Day, there was rain in St. George, and we've seen a bunch of rain events when it comes to special church events, and either rain stopping, or in this case, there was rain on the day of his funeral. Okay, so I put together a new spreadsheet just to easily visualize how this Aurora was exactly in between their two death dates. So here you have President Nelson passing away September 27th, and you see the numbers right here. Just pay attention to this column. In fact, I'll hide this one for right now. We don't really need to pay attention to that. So this is, the first day, second day, third day. And then you go all the way down, and right in the middle, okay, 46 days later on November, well, actually, I guess it'd be 45 days later, but because if you're counting that first day. But 46 days gets you to November 11th, and that's when you had this Aurora. And then it continued on into the morning of November 12th, so that's why you have these 2 days. The night of the 11th, the morning of the 12th. And then if you do a countdown starting at 46, and then once you get down to number 1, that's the day that President Holland passed away. Okay, so now, to address the question in the chat, we had another Aurora event. It wasn't felt so much in the United States as it was in Europe, but I do have some pictures I'm going to show you that were taken in Texas, and I think one in Arizona. It was seen throughout the United States, and it was definitely seen throughout Europe, but there was another one of these large geomagnetic storms that produced Aurora really far south. So if we go here, and you start with number 1, okay, counting the days, the day that he passed away is number 1. You come down here, you get to 24, and you have the Aurora on the night of the 19th of January and into the morning of the 20th. And then if you start to count down, starting with 24, when you get to number 1, it's the day that Elder Clark G. Gilbert was ordained. The chances of that happening, to my mind, are so unlikely. It feels like the chances of this happening are astronomical. Why is it that you have these already rare geomagnetic storms with auroras that can be seen throughout the United States, in Europe, and other places of the world? You have these rare Aurora displays, and these last 2 times they took place exactly between these 3 events. The first set was the passing of President Nelson and President Holland. You had the Aurora right in the middle, and then the passing of President Holland and the ordination of Elder Clark G. Gilbert, another one right in the middle. You can't ignore this. You can't. If you do, that's so silly. There's more to consider when it comes to church-specific signs. We're going to talk about that a little bit more toward the end of the video. But here is Noah, and this is the severe geomagnetic storm. It was a G4. Go to X. We have this post from Dr. Ryan French. It wasn't just a severe, it wasn't just a severe geomagnetic storm, but it was this too. He says, okay, this is kind of crazy. We're currently experiencing the first severe, or S4, solar radiation storm since 2003. So not just a geomagnetic storm, but the first severe solar radiation storm since 2003. Many are familiar with solar flares and geomagnetic storms, but solar radiation storms are the third category of space weather that rarely get public hype. So make of that what you will. I don't know. This was the forecast for that night, January 19th and the morning of January 20th. So you can see it extended really far down. Unfortunately, here in Independence, I wasn't able to see it. I kept checking the skies about once an hour, and we didn't see it here, even with the long exposure mode on my phone. But over in Europe, they sure saw it. Here's an animation that shows all the different reports of seeing the aurora, and it looks like they were able to see it all the way down to the south of France, right here, right on the Mediterranean. Um, and I know that this is accurate because I was going through X, and you can search for specific words, and then you can sort it by the latest. And there were all these pictures coming in from what were clearly individual user accounts. So they weren't, the content creators of X. They were just users that have like no followers. They mainly consume content. Um, and very few people saw their posts, but I was seeing all these pictures from these type of people in Europe being like, "Oh my gosh, this is the first time that I've seen the aurora. This is amazing." So here's some pictures. This is from user at PAES. Intense aurora from Austria in Germany now. And then here's one from, I'm not going to try and pronounce that. Polar lights over Dresden, which is in Germany. Look at this. I saw a number of pictures that showed this. I don't know what you would call it, a plasma structure. But there were many, many, many people that were taking pictures specifically of this green pillar, or whatever you want to call it. He was just one of them. This is from Berlin. Now going over to the United States, this was taken from Lampasas, Texas, which, by the way, I've been to Lampasas before because I was stationed at Fort Hood in central Texas. So I was like, oh my gosh, they saw it in Lampasas. And of course, it wasn't as intense. It was, really low on the horizon, but they could still see it in Texas. And this is central Texas. Here's one from Ridgecrest, California. Again, not as intense, but Karen W. Webb saw it. And then Melissa Kritzer Fry saw it from Arizona. And I love these pictures because you can see the saguaro cactuses on this hill or mountain right here. So it was one of these events. We had two of them in 2024. One was in, oh my gosh, I'm already forgetting. One was in May of 2024. And at that time, I was living in South Central Kansas, and it blew me away when that happened because I never expected to see the aurora in my lifetime, and certainly not in South Central Kansas. And then it happened again in October of that year, 2 times. And then I moved here to Independence. And last year on November 11th, I saw it from the Temple lot. And then this 4th time, I missed it, but these people all got to see it. And so it made it so that we had another one of these events. And this time it was exactly in between the passing away of President Holland and the calling of, or the ordination of Elder Clark G. Gilbert. That is so amazing. It's so strange. And I'm sorry, this is not coincidence. It's not. Now, the one other thing to point out is that we had the ordination of Elder Gerald Casse on November 6th. And that's actually the first thing that came to mind when this happened, this aurora on November 11th. I was like, oh, maybe it's like highlighting the calling of Elder Casse. Maybe he's going to do something really, really important. Maybe he's going to become the prophet someday, or who knows what. I didn't make the connection because in my mind, the way that I pictured the months, I was like, oh yeah, it's not. Well, no, President Holland hadn't passed away at that point. I'm thinking back to when this first happened. So I was like, oh yeah, maybe it's because of Elder Casse. And maybe it partially was, but anyway, I haven't noticed anything in regards to the ordination of Elder Case and these auroras, because as far as I'm aware, there aren't any events that happened exactly in between, the passing of President Nelson and the ordination of Elder Case or anything else. Now, if you have any additional information, if you've noticed anything, let me know. But for some reason, it seems to be President Nelson, President Holland, and Elder Clark G. Gilbert. So make of that what you will, but something happened. Something is being highlighted. Now, for this last part of the video, I want to talk about church-specific signs. There are certain signs that you cannot dismiss, that you just can't dismiss them. So, for example, going back to 1833, November 13th, this was right as the Saints were being driven from Jackson County and making their way across the Missouri River into Clay County. I have this account right here from Emily Partridge, the youngest daughter of Bishop Edward Partridge. I'm not going to read it. You can pause and read this red part. But she talked about the fact that there was this enormous meteor shower. And it was so intense that it frightened, for example, the mobs. And the Saints took it as a sign. But it happened as they were in transit between Jackson County and Clay County. And some people were still on the banks of the Missouri River. But this was seen all throughout, at least the United, well, it obviously would have been seen throughout the world, but there's reports of this all throughout the United States. It says here, intense Leonid meteor shower producing more than 100,000 meteors an hour takes place as Saints are being driven from Jackson County, Missouri, frightens mobs. And I need to have this, I need to have the details here, but I seem to recall reading that this was kind of like the first time that there was any serious study into meteor showers, because this was just so intense. And I guess the scientists of the world realized, okay, we need to study this phenomenon. But it may have looked something like this. I took an old depiction of it from a newspaper and used AI to animate it, just to give you a sense. And I don't think that this is much of an exaggeration, with the exception of these meteors that like go up the other direction. But yeah, that was kind of a big deal what happened. Okay, later on, I have a few others that I want to highlight. This one still blows my mind, no pun intended. So the day after President Ezra Taft Benson passed away, there was what's called the Utah-Wyoming Derecho. A derecho is a straight line of wind that goes for something like 200 miles, and it's hurricane force wind. It's not because of a hurricane, but it's basically hurricane force wind. And you can go to this paper that was written, and here's kind of a depiction of it going from southwestern Utah and then in a northwest direction up to Wyoming. And right in the middle is Salt Lake City. So you had this very unusual event the day after President Benson passed away. I don't think that that's a coincidence. Okay. We also have the August 11th. There's another one of those 11s. The August 11th tornado in downtown Salt Lake City. There's actually a lot of details to that story, but we're not going to cover it here. I was living in Murray at the time. That's my hometown. And I remember hearing this. We were doing 2-a-day football practices for high school football. And after practice, I was in the locker room and they were talking about, oh, did you hear there was a tornado in downtown Salt Lake? And I was like, what? Because that just doesn't happen along the Wasatch Front. Anyway, and then we have the dedication of the Palmyra, New York temple. There was one of these rain events where the rain was temporarily stopped and sunshine came through for the dedication. And then on that night, there was a strong geomagnetic storm and Aurora. And I don't know if it's of the same type as what we have seen over these last couple of years, where it could be seen throughout the United States, but I guess it was so intense that there was this major study done, and they call it the Great Aurora and Geomagnetic Storm of 2000, April 6th through 7th. This is an article or a paper written at Harvard. So that was the night that the Palmyra New York Temple was dedicated. You can't tell me that that's not a sign. And then we get to the eclipses. On August 21st, which happened to be President Monson's 90th birthday, and Elder Stevenson pointed this out in General Conference. I think he pointed it out in the October General Conference of that year. But you had the Great American Eclipse, or at least the first of two Great American Eclipses, and it went over. Let me pull up my Google Earth map here. So here's the path of totality right here. And it went over all, except for just this one right here, it went over all the church sites in Missouri. And it covered them perfectly. You see how close you have the release site of Joseph and Hiram Smith right at the northern border of the path of totality, as well as Adam-on-Diamond right here. Here's the entrance to Adam-on-Diamond, and you can see the edge of the path of totality is not that far away. And then you have all the other places, far west, Tinney Grove, the Battle of Crooked River. There's Richmond over there. So, Lexington, where you had the Saluda steamboat accident. And then down here is Independence. And then the only one that's outside of the path of totality was a property that was owned by Bishop Partridge. And I think later Alexander Donovan. I don't think he lived there. He was in charge of purchasing land for the Saints. I think it was just one of those properties. But that's kind of stunning. You can see that the path of totality had to take that exact path to cover all of these. It couldn't have varied by even just a couple miles, I don't think. Okay. And then we had 7 days after October 7th of 2023, there was a annular solar eclipse, and the path of annularity went through Utah, and it missed all the temples that were in operation except for the Monticello, Utah temple. It missed the maximum number of operating temples. The only other temple that was physically in the path was the Manti, Utah temple, and it was under renovation, so it was not in operation. And then this one up here is the Ephraim, Utah temple, which, yeah, that I think it's still under construction. It's definitely still under construction, right? But it definitely wasn't in operation at that point. So 7 days after, 7 days, oh gosh, 7 days after October 7th. And by the way, exactly 2 years before President Oaks became president of the church. So this was October 14th of 2023. President Oaks became president of the church October 14th of 2025. You can't tell me that this is coincidence. And then we had the other Great American Eclipse in 2024. This time it went over our other church sites, the ones in New York, like the Sacred Grove, the Peter Whitmer log home where the church was established, and then the Kirtland Temple, which had just been purchased by the church a month before. Okay, so we're having all these like signs in the heavens that seem to be very church specific. We should pay attention to this. We really, really should. Because these are signs for us, and I think that they're related to the second coming. We know that there's supposed to be signs in the heavens before the second coming. I think these are them. And we just had two that took place exactly in between these key dates. The passing of President Nelson and President Holland, right in the middle in Aurora, and then between President Holland and Elder Clark G. Gilbert, another one. There's no way that that's just coincidence. And then, of course, March 18th of the year 2020, as the pandemic was starting to enter the United States, we had the angel Moroni of the Salt Lake Temple. Of all temples, this is the headquarters temple of the church. So it wasn't the Draper, Utah temple. It wasn't the Ochre Mountain temple. It wasn't the Bountiful temple. It wasn't the Jordan River temple. It wasn't any of the other Utah temples. It was the Salt Lake Temple, whose angel Moroni dropped his trumpet because of an earthquake. And then a couple days later, missionaries were called home and missions were restricted. And then a couple days after that, all temples worldwide were closed. Yeah. Okay. And then Eclipse. And then, we had the Pioneer Day fire behind Ensign Peak, which is a symbol of Ensign Peak is essentially a symbol of church headquarters. It's an ensign to the nations, or it represents how the church, which is based out of Salt Lake, is an ensign to the nations. It's what Brigham Young saw in vision before he entered the Salt Lake Valley. It's how he recognized that this was the place. There was a wildfire behind Ensign Peak on Pioneer Day. And on that same day of 2024, that's when the 2034 Olympics were announced, where all nations once again will come to Salt Lake City. And then, here we go. We have the Independence tornado on June 3rd. It's the tornado that got the closest to the temple lot since 1950. I should have pulled up that website, but there's a website that shows a map, and that happened. It just happened to take place during Community of Christ 2025 World Conference, and they were in session at that time, so it interrupted that session that they were having. And on that same day, there was a tornado very close to Nauvoo. It was on the other side of the Mississippi in Iowa at Fort Madison, but it was only like a few miles away from Nauvoo. What are the chances of there being a tornado in Independence and one right across the river from Nauvoo on the same day and during Community of Christ's World Conference? We have this. I wanted to highlight this. So President Oaks recently talked about the fact that he was president of BYU for its 100th anniversary, and then for its 150th anniversary, he was now president of the church. In 2 days after he became president of the church, on the 14th of October, 2 days later, they opened a 50-year time capsule, and there was a gavel inside, which is perfect because President Oaks was a judge. He was on the Utah Supreme Court. And just, again, look at it from his point of view. What would it be like to be president of BYU when it turns 100 years old, and then 50 years later, you become president of the church, and 2 days after that, that time capsule is opened. You're president of the church for its 150th anniversary when the time capsule is opened. That's crazy. So anyway, that's what I have for you. I don't know what this all means, but it at the very least, it's a sign. It may just be, in general, a sign in the heavens, just another warning that the second coming is soon. Is it anything beyond that? I don't know. Is it highlighting Elder Gilbert specifically? Is he going to become president of the church someday? A lot of people have pointed out that he's relatively young as far as apostles go. So does it have to do with that? I don't know. I don't know, but we should just at the very least take note of it. But that's going to be it for this one. I'll talk to you guys later.